My name is Amaro Guadalupe Rivera.
And my name is Arturo Hernandez.
And we are here with Pete Gallegos, interviewing him for SFSU's LTNS 435 Oral History Project, taught by Professor Maria Quintana. Thank you for meeting with us today.
Good morning.
Can you please just again state your name, your age, and where you were born?
Name is Pete Gallegos. I'm 65. I was born in Durango, Colorado.
So, would you please tell us why and how you became to be a activist or organizer in the Mission District here in San Francisco?
I think probably the two main reasons were, one is my parents were involved in the community back in the 60s. And at that time, it was really important for Latinos to find a voice, and there was very few avenues for that. Mainly you had an organization called MAPA, Mexican American Political Association, and that was it. A couple of other organizations that were run by the churches, GI Forum, those things. Anyway, my parents were involved in those organizations, so I had some role models to follow. And then the second reason I got involved in community organizing was the farm workers, United Farm Worker Movement was very prominent at the time in the late 60s. The Civil Rights Movement was very prominent. The women's movement was becoming prominent. And the war in Vietnam was on everybody's mind. Because as young people, we were the next in line to go to the front lines. And everybody knew they were sending Latinos to the front lines, sending the blacks to the front lines first. So I looked around and thought that it was important to get involved, let my voice be heard, and hopefully contribute in some way.
Thank you. Could you please elaborate on the specific kind of work and activism that you did in the mission?
Sure. I grew up in the mission, so I knew the mission very well. I had a lot of friends there. Went to all the schools in the mission, except for high school. I went to Balboa High School, which is in Excelsior, and then went on to City College. And at City College, I got involved with one of the student organizations called La Raza Unida. And a lot of it, to be honest with you, was more networking and social than really heavy-duty organizing. But you meet a lot of people, and I met some folks who were organizing in the Mission District on 24th Street, an organization called La Raza en Acción Local. They had just started in 1970, and they were forming an information and referral center where people could come in and get information about anything that was available and then be referred out. So if you needed information on your tenant rights, you could go there. If you needed information on where to get health care, you could go there, so on. They also were putting together a tutorial program for primary, elementary school kids after school. And I got involved that way. I went to one of the, I think it was the tutorial program, became a tutor after school. And at the same time, I was exploring a career in art. I was very attracted to graphic arts and music. And so when I was volunteering at the tutorial center, the organizers wanted to organize and put in a silkscreen center to print posters for all the different activities that were going on in the community. Since I had a background in art and I knew a little bit about silk screening, I gravitated over to that. It was a really interesting experience because the printers in the silkscreen program were ex-cons who had learned printing in prison. It was one of the things they learned.
Yeah.
And here in the community, it became a very valuable skill to use that. And Malaquias Montoya over in UC Berkeley was one of the best-known silkscreen artists, and he was teaching a lot of people silkscreening. Galeria de la Raza, and the mission had its own little silkscreen operation. So it became very important to start to organize that whole effort and make it available to the community. And so I became one of the co-founders of La Raza Silkscreen Center in 1971. And with very little funding, we were able to open up a small storefront, got some equipment donated, bought some, and started printing posters for all the other nonprofits and community and student efforts.
I see. And within those community organizations and those groups that you were involved with, what did you discover as your strengths?
Well, I think the strength was that we were able to communicate with people in a very economical way. You know, we didn't have access to the electronic media. We didn't have the money to advertise in newspapers. So how do you reach people? Printing posters was a really, really effective way. You could print up 50, 100 posters, put them around in the community, and within one day you could advertise an event. So it was also very effective. It was the images are very graphic, so you don't need to have a ton of words on the poster if you use an image that people in the community can relate to.
Looking back at your time as an artist in the mission and really using this artivism to not only speak to the community but also help out the community and bring awareness to the community, is there anything that you would have done differently looking back?
There's always things you would want to do differently, but at the time you don't know what else you can do other than what your instincts are telling you. I think in general I would have liked to move from just doing local prints and expand into prints that were a little more could reach a bigger, larger audience, which we never did. We stayed very local. But on the other hand, that was our strength because we knew exactly who our market was, who the community was, and they knew where we were. Now, we'll add to this, we weren't the only ones doing this. I mean, we were taking our cues from the artists in Cuba and in other places around even the country. In Sacramento, they had the Royal Chicano Air Force. In other cities in Texas and down in LA, Plaza de la Raza, all these, they were all doing things very similar. All this was happening not in a coordinated fashion where everybody was connected. It was all happening at the same time. And we would cross paths once in a while and share ideas and share experiences. But probably that would have been another thing we could have done is connected with people more and maximized our efforts in a larger context. Mm-hmm. But again, we didn't know what was going to happen even the next year from when we started, so we didn't project out that far.
I see. And how has the Mission District changed from the time you were actively involved?
Well, it has changed in very dramatic fashion. I mean, just from the demographics, it's changed. The people who live there now are very different from the people who lived there 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You have economics that are different now, so that rents and affordability of everything being just able to survive is totally different. It's affecting the Mission District. But I think I tell this story a lot, and I think it kind of sums it up. I would say in 1970, through 1980, there were probably a dozen panaderias on 24th Street alone, just from Bryant Street to Mission. 1, 2 on every block. And those panaderias were making pan dulce every day. And they were packed every day. And on Sundays they were doubly packed because the community was primarily Latino, Catholic, and followed those traditions of buying pan dulce on Sunday. Everybody was making a great living. You go down 24th Street now, and there's maybe 2 or 3 panaderias. And recently one closed, La Victoria. So the people who were going to those panaderias, they're not there anymore. There's other people there. They're buying bagels. They're buying donuts with bacon in them. They're buying other things. So right there demonstrates how the community has changed. I think it's still a lot left of the old community in the Mission. Some of the families that had purchased their own property, some of the small businesses that have purchased their own property are still there. But unfortunately, the children of some of them people who are still there cannot no longer live in the Mission because they can't afford the rents. And so that generational connection is falling apart. I had friends that I grew up with in the Mission. I'm still friends with them. My kids have friends that they grew up with in the Mission who don't live there anymore. And we've lost that.
With all of your vast experience now, what would you consider to be good characteristics of someone who is an artist but using their art for activism or for awareness?
Well, I think there's several people who come to mind. One, Fuentes, who's a really, really fantastic printmaker who has stayed true to his love of the community and wanting to share his art. You have Michael Rios, who is another tremendous artist, does a lot of printmaking, murals. You have Juana Alicia, who has consistently produced beautiful murals for all over the Bay Area. You have Ray Patlan, who no longer lives in the Mission. I think he went back to Chicago. And now you have an emerging, that I see, spoken word artists that are out there that are using their voice to talk about things that are of concern to them and to the community. And back in the day, we had a lot of musicians who were representing the community. Carlos Santana, Malo, just to name a few. But there was a lot of musicians. We sort of have lost that. And I think some of that has to do with technology. People can't afford to pay the musicians. People can't afford to pay the artists. Carlos Cookie Gonzalez is a rare guy, man. He's a very talented artist, but he's also a very talented musician. And he's been able to use both of those. So if you wanted to put it in a nutshell, per capita from the square footage of the Mission District, we probably have more artists and musicians than anywhere else in the country that have come out of this neighborhood. And that's probably one of the legacies that future generations are going to look back on, because art always lives on. People move on, they die off, but the art lives.
And to sort of start wrapping things up, what advice would you give to young people today who will see themselves as a community organizer such as yourself?
I think you have to always be true to what you believe. Be true to your own standards, and follow what you really want to do. Because I think sometimes young people, and I was very guilty of it myself, you follow the crowd. You follow what is everybody else is doing. And sometimes you get caught up in groupthink instead of thinking about what you want to do. Now, I'm not saying to be an isolationist and just only not associate with other people, but you always have to maintain your identity so you can look at things clearly. And I've seen over and over where people stop doing that, and then there may be 4, 5, 10 years that goes by that nothing really new gets done because everybody's just preaching to the choir. They're all talking to each other the same thing. And that's dangerous. You know, I think it doesn't allow for new people to come in and express their ideas, and it puts people in a complacent mind frame. Oh, we're doing these great things, but really what you're doing is just talking to each other.